Okay, so we're here with Director Todd Hennessey of Oedipus and Antigone. And Todd, I just want you to talk about, if you could, just tell us what exactly is the process of trying to figure out how to put together a production of Oedipus and Antigone from the director's standpoint.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I've directed several Greek tragedies now, and they're plays that I absolutely love. And I think the first question that you kind of have to ask yourself is, do they still work? Are these still plays that make sense for an audience? Do folks still want to hear these things? Do folks want to hear about the gods and those kinds of forces and the big themes that tragedies deal with? And I think yes. I think they absolutely make sense in a modern context. The trick, though, I think, for a director is to find a way to make those plays make sense to a modern audience while still being true as much as we can to the circumstances under which they would have first been performed. As we know, the Greek tragedies were done outdoors, they were done all day long, they were huge, big community celebrations. We don't do that anymore. We do plays inside, largely for smaller audiences, and we don't really deal with these big, giant, universal themes. That's problem one. How do you get around those big, giant themes? And I think for us, if you look at the history of Greek tragedy, they were written and performed in a century, almost 3,000 years ago, a century of almost continual war. The Greeks were at war for almost 100 years. And that's the backdrop against which those plays were written. And for us, very unfortunately, we're still at war. And if you look back, for me, over the last, say, 100 years, it is a century of war. And again, unfortunately, that's, for me, oftentimes is the hook. So in this production, we've tried, as best we can, to bring in elements of the ancient Greek theater and to reference, and only to reference, the continual strife of the 20th century. So both these productions are sitting in a world it's war-torn, it's besieged, there's rebellion, and it made sense to me to place all that in a sort of Eastern European context. And if you think about the circumstances of the Russian Revolution, say, or the First World War, the Second World War, that was Europe, and a Europe torn apart, just like the Greeks were facing that same kind of strife and turmoil and bloodshed. For me, that made sense. Put those characters in that kind of world, and a modern audience, I hope, understands the larger theme because of that kind of a context.
And so if that's the sort of thematic approach towards doing it from a modern context, what are the specific production aspects that you sort of borrow from?
Right. So again, as we all know, the Greeks used a large chorus. The productions were all played in music, largely sung or chanted. So it's almost musical theater. But a kind of musical theater we just don't know anymore. So what I've tried to do with this production is to boil it down, so a much smaller chorus. But the chorus is very, very important. They speak for the people. So trying to find a rhythm and a way for that chorus to speak together, but individually, speak to the main characters, and have those main characters communicate with the chorus and with us becomes important. So try as much as I can to help my actors find a very human way into this. So they're people speaking to each other, not huge giant. They aren't playing stereotypes. They're playing people, and those people are trying to work out exactly what's going on in their lives, what these problems are, why is there a plague, why is the world falling apart. Again, I think there are issues that we still deal with today, but I'm trying to find a very human way for those people to speak to each other.
This might be kind of a difficult question, but it's obvious that we should still study these plays because they do have a lot of resonance for a modern audience, But why should we still produce and perform these plays?
That's a very good question. And like I say, this is my fourth, I think, go-around with Greek tragedy. And I always, at a certain point, I think to myself, is it going to work? Because we deal today in television and film, when the cuts are very short, people don't speak in long speeches, it's all very, 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 very sort of short sentences, that sort of Tarantino thing, with all rapid-fire dialogue, and the Greek plays are about lengthy speeches. People come out, they see the piece, and they go off. That's an issue. I think they're important because, as I say, the Greek writers, Sophocles obviously being one of the most important ones, were dealing with who are we? Why are we in this world? Why are we killing each other? Why are we fighting with each other? How do we get past, or how do we get to a place when we can be at peace? I know that sounds a bit airy-fairy, but that for me is what the plays are about. And every Greek tragedy, at its essence, is about a human being trying to say, please, can we stop fighting? Please, can we figure out a way to live with each other? And I think there's nothing more important than that. And I think all great drama speaks to the human condition, and the Greeks spoke to the human condition like nobody else.
And how is that enhanced through performance as opposed to just reading? You know, to read about it, but to see it actually in performance, how is that? Why is that important?
Well, again, that's a funny question because obviously the reader can read these plays and picture things or imagine things or take away their own meaning. Again, they were poets. The Greek writers were poets, and they were writing poetry that was meant to be spoken, meant to be seen, and ultimately meant to be heard. Most of our words that we use today in modern drama derive from the Greeks, and it's all about being seen and being heard. And again, for me, there's nothing more important than these plays being performed by live actors in a room with a live audience, and all of us sharing those experiences and those emotions together. And the act of reading, I think for the most part, is an intimate and solo thing. And for me, put a bunch of people in a room and let them all experience the same thing. That's the beauty of all theater, really, and of this stuff in particular, because again, this was meant as a community celebration. The Greeks all came out and all saw this stuff together. So here we are on tour, going to all these theaters, folks going to see these shows and having that experience together.
Great. Thanks, Todd.
No sweat.